We often just, take for granted these amazing medicines we have. Pills, creams, injections. They improve our lives, sometimes save them. And if you're listening, you probably like getting to the heart of things, understanding how stuff works quickly.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, we're diving into something really fundamental, pharmaceutical raw materials.
Right. These are basically the essential ingredients, the absolute building blocks for every single medication and health product out there.
Okay, so pharmaceutical raw materials, what does that actually cover? Sounds big.
It is pretty broad, yeah.
Ah,
In essence, it's any substance that's used when manufacturing a drug.
yeah.
So that definitely includes the main players, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs. Those are the bits that actually, have the therapeutic
The
effect.
part that makes you better.
Correct. But it's also everything
Uh,
else, the inactive ingredients, the excipients that help deliver the medicine properly, effectively. Even the packaging materials count. And everything has to meet really strict regulatory standards.
ah,
Think of it like baking a complicated cake. You've got your flour and sugar, the stars maybe, but you also need the eggs, the baking powder, the vanilla, all that stuff to make the final thing actually work.
right, right. So it's the whole recipe, not just the main ingredient. Got it. So our mission for this deep dive then is to really unpack these crucial materials, understand what they are, and also the challenges involved, getting them from, well, wherever they start to the finished product.
Hmm.
We've looked at a lot of information and we're aiming to, pull out the key nuggets for you, make
Yeah.
it clear, engaging, give you the essentials without drowning you in detail.
Exactly. We'll start by looking at how these raw materials were sort of grouped, categorized. Then we'll get into some of the big problems the industry faces in this area. It's pretty vital stuff.
Sounds like a plan. So let's start with the basics. How are these materials broken down? The main categories.
Well, the sources we looked at generally split them into two main groups: active pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs we mentioned, and excipients.
APIs, right. So those are the heavy lifters in a medicine, the ones doing the actual work.
Absolutely. APIs are the core components. They provide the therapeutic benefits, the biologically active substance that treats or prevents whatever the illness is.
Hmm.
And what's really interesting, I think, is where they come from. It's quite diverse.
Oh,
Yeah, they can be made through chemical synthesis, in a lab,
hmm.
or derived from natural sources, plants, animals,
Hmm.
and increasingly through biotechnology.
Biotechnology. Like what?
Well, think about using, say, living cells or microorganisms to produce really complex molecules, certain proteins, antibodies.
Hmm.
It's a big area now for creating very sophisticated APIs.
Ah, okay.
But regardless of how they're made, the absolute key thing, the non-negotiable part, is the quality, the purity, and the potency. That's what ensures the medicine actually works and is safe for you to take.
Makes total sense. You don't want like a painkiller that doesn't kill pain or worse. The ibuprofen example is perfect. That's the API, right? Its job is
Hmm.
clear, reduce pain, reduce inflammation. So what about the other group? Excipients. They sound less exciting.
Ha! Maybe less glamorous, but honestly, they're absolutely commercial. They're technically inactive substances, meaning they don't have a therapeutic effect themselves, but they perform loads of vital functions.
Like what kind of functions?
Well, they support the API. They help with the overall safety, the effectiveness, even just the practicality of using the medicine.
Practicality. How do you mean?
Okay, imagine you have a really potent API, and you only need a tiny, tiny amount. Trying to measure or handle that accurately would be, well, almost impossible for a patient, right?
Yeah, true.
So excipients can add bulk, make a tablet a manageable size. They can also help stabilize the drug, make sure it doesn't degrade too quickly. They ensure it dissolves correctly in your body so the API actually gets absorbed. They can even improve the taste, which is obviously super important for kids' medicines.
Ah, I see. So they're kind of the support crew, making sure the star performer, the API, can actually do its job properly.
That's a great way to put it, the unsung heroes.
Can you give some specific examples? Like what are common excipients?
Sure. You got fillers. Lactose is a really common one. Just use to bulk up a tablet, make it big enough to handle. Then binders, like starch maybe.
Yeah.
They act like glue to hold the tablet ingredients together.
So it doesn't crumble.
Right. Then you need the opposite, sometimes disintegrants.
Yeah.
Cellulose is an example. They help the tablet break apart quickly once you swallow it, so the API gets released.
Okay.
Lubricants, maybe magnesium stearate. That stops the powder sticking to the machinery when they're pressing the tablets. Preservatives, like parabens, you might see those in liquids or creams to stop bacteria growing, extend shelf life.
Great.
And of course, flavoring agents, sweeteners, minty flavors, whatever, just to make it easier to take.
Wow. It's actually amazing how many jobs these inactive things do. Sounds like choosing the right excipients is just as important as getting the API right.
Oh, absolutely. They have to be compatible with the API, obviously. Can't interfere with it. And they have to meet all the same strict regulatory standards for safety. It's a very deliberate selection process.
Okay, so APIs and excipients are the big two, but the sources mentioned other types too, didn't they? Let's quickly cover those.
Yeah, definitely. There are solvents, things like water, ethanol, methanol, acetone. They're used to dissolve things, or dilute substances during manufacturing, both for making the API itself and for formulating the final drug. The key here, super high purity. Any impurity could contaminate the final medicine.
Like using distilled water in a science experiment, kind of?
Exactly, that kind of principle. Then you have intermediates.
Intermediates.
Yeah, these are chemicals formed during the synthesis of an API. They're not the final product, but they're like crucial stepping stones in the chemical reactions needed to get there.
Ah, like steps in a recipe again.
Pretty much. The example given was in making antibiotics, like penicillin derivatives. You use specific intermediates to build up the final molecule, and these often need very careful handling specific storage conditions.
Gotcha. Intermediates, essential steps. What else?
Then there are raw materials from natural sources, plants and animals.
Hmm.
Plants are huge for traditional herbal medicines, and animal sources are still vital for things like heparin, which is an anticoagulant, insulin, some vaccines.
Right.
With these natural materials, the source, the origin, and the quality control are super important because, well, nature isn't perfectly uniform, is it? So ensuring consistency is key.
Makes sense. You need reliability if it's medicine.
Definitely. Then packaging materials. Bottles, blister packs, labels. Seems simple, maybe, but they're classed as raw materials too. They have to protect the drug, ensure its stability. Think about medicines sensitive to moisture or light.
Yeah, you don't want it ruined before you open it.
Exactly. And the packaging carries vital information, so it's part of regulatory compliance too.
Yeah.
The example of needing special high barrier packs for moisture-sensitive drugs really highlights that.
Okay, what's next?
Biological raw materials. This is things like cells, tissues, blood, plasma. They're the starting point for biological products. Vaccines, again, blood-derived therapies, gene therapies. As you can imagine, the quality control here is incredibly stringent.
Has to be, I guess.
Absolutely. Think about using human plasma to make clotting factors for people with hemophilia. You need exceptional purity and safety, no room for error.
Wow. Okay, nearly there.
Last main group is additives and reagents. These are chemicals used in smaller amounts during manufacturing. Things like catalysts to speed up reactions, stabilizers to stop the API breaking down, or preservatives like sodium benzoate in liquids. They play essential background roles.
So it's a really diverse landscape. All these different materials, each with its own job, its own requirements. Okay, let's
Yeah.
flip the coin now. The sources also talk quite a bit about the problems, the challenges in the market for these raw materials. This sounds like where things get tricky.
Yeah, indeed. This market faces some pretty significant hurdles, and these hurdles can ripple right through the whole pharmaceutical industry, affecting, whether medicines are available, their quality, and ultimately how much they cost. It has real-world impacts for everyone.
So what are some of the big ones, the major issues?
Well, a huge one, especially recently, is supply chain disruptions.
Ah,
Global events can just throw a massive spanner in the works. Geopolitical tensions, natural disasters, pandemics, they can all severely disrupt the flow of these essential materials. COVID-19 was a massive wake-up call, wasn't it?
definitely. I remember hearing about shortages of certain drugs.
Exactly. It led to major delays and shortages of both APIs and excipients. And part of the problem, the vulnerability, comes from relying really heavily on just a few suppliers, often concentrated in specific countries like China and India.
Right. So something happens there.
The whole world feels it. It's
Yeah.
a big concentration risk. The industry knows this and is trying to diversify, but it's complex.
Putting all your eggs in one basket, geographically speaking. Okay. What about the quality? That must be another worry.
Quality control is paramount.
Yeah.
It's a constant challenge. If the raw materials aren't up to scratch, if they're compromised somehow, the final medicine could be ineffective or worse, unsafe.
Yeah.
So ensuring consistent quality, batch after batch, supplier after supplier. It's tough. There are risks of variations in quality, potential contamination, maybe less strict manufacturing practices, especially if you're sourcing from certain areas to keep costs down.
And I guess that pressure to reduce costs must be intense. Does that push companies towards potentially riskier sources sometimes?
That's a really valid concern. Sourcing from lower-cost suppliers maybe in regions with less stringent oversight, can introduce risks if their quality checks aren't as robust. It could lead to materials that don't meet the standards needed in, say, the US or Europe. That could mean recalls or, like you said, worst case, harm to patients.
That's pretty sobering. What about regulations? You mentioned standards. Is that complex too?
Oh, incredibly complex. The pharma industry is heavily regulated, right? And raw materials have to meet these very strict quality and safety standards set by different bodies all over the world. The FDA in the US, the EMA in Europe, and so on. Just navigating all these different, sometimes conflicting requirements is a major hurdle.
So something might be fine for one market but not another.
Precisely. That can cause big delays in getting drugs approved. It adds cost, making sure you comply everywhere. And there can be legal trouble if materials fail inspection in a particular country. It adds layers and layers of complexity and expense.
And cost is always a factor, isn't it? Are prices for these raw materials stable?
Not really, no. Price volatility is a big issue. Raw material prices can swing quite a bit based on, well, basic supply and demand, changes in the cost of the basic chemicals they're made from, even currency exchange rates.
Hmm.
The sources pointed out how API costs, for example, can jump if there's a shortage of a key starting material, or if, say, new environmental regulations in a manufacturing hub increase production costs.
And those higher costs, they don't just disappear, do they? They probably end up affecting the price we pay at the pharmacy.
That's often the outcome, yes. Raw material price hikes can push up overall manufacturing costs, which can unfortunately make essential medicines less affordable or accessible for patients.
Okay, we've talked about supply chain issues, quality regulations, costs, kind of unintentional problems maybe. But the information also mentioned something more deliberate, more worrying. Counterfeit and substandard materials.
Yes, this is a really serious concern. Counterfeit materials might look the part, but they just don't meet the quality or efficacy standards. Substandard ones just plain don't conform to the specs. The danger is they can be really hard to spot.
And if they get into the manufacturing process?
The safety risks for patients are huge. Ineffective treatment at best, serious harm at worst.
And I suppose this is a bigger problem in places where the rules aren't enforced as strictly.
Sadly, yes. In regions with weaker regulatory oversight, the risk of these fake or low-quality materials getting into the supply chain is significantly higher. It's a major public health threat.
Finally, the sources touched on environmental and ethical concerns too.
They did. Manufacturing chemicals can be, well, messy. It can involve hazardous substances, create waste. If this happens in areas with lax environmental rules, the impact can be significant.
Right.
And then there are ethical questions. Sourcing materials from regions may be known for poor labor conditions or where animal welfare standards aren't great. These are becoming bigger considerations for companies and consumers alike.
Wow. Okay. This has been incredibly eye-opening. We've really covered a lot of ground, the sheer variety of these raw materials, from the APIs doing the work to the packaging, keeping it safe, and then all these pretty significant challenges around supply, quality, cost, regulation, even counterfeits and ethics. It's way more complex than I first thought.
It really is. The journey a medicine takes, just from its basic ingredients to ending up in your hands, it's intricate. It faces loads of potential roadblocks. Understanding these challenges really helps appreciate the immense effort and scrutiny that goes into making sure the medicines we rely on are actually safe and effective.
Absolutely. So for you listening, maybe the next time you reach for a medication, just pause for a second. Think about that whole invisible network, the global supply chains, the different materials, the complex regulations, the quality checks, even the ethical thoughts that all had to come together to bring that simple pill or cream to you. It's a pretty vital part of keeping us all healthy, isn't it?